So welcome back to This Week in Golf on Sauga 960. I'm your host, Chris McKee. My next guest was inducted into the Canadian Golf Hall of Fame back in 2011. He's a past winner on the PGA Tour and is now the CEO of Mindtrack Golf. I'm joined by Richard Zokol. Dick, thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you, Chris. Nice to chat about golf and the current affairs that are happening. There's a lot of fascinating things to discuss.
So wanted to start with the PGA Championship this past weekend at Southern Hills. You've obviously played there throughout your career. Just want to talk about your experience on the course. The PGA guys today seem to be having a hard time with it. Your thoughts on the course itself at Southern Hills?
Well, looking at it on how they played it this past week is it's just brought back a lot of memories. I played the U.S. Open at Southern Hills in 2001, and it's just one of my favorite golf courses. It you know, the viewers who watched it, you know, they can tell that it's not a typical PGA Tour event. You know, it's not, you know, TPC Sawgrass. It's very different. It's very old. They've had to do some lengthening to the golf course because of the equipment nowadays, then the guys' athleticism, they hit it so far. So it's one of the great golf courses. It's a very difficult, challenging golf course, and one of my favorites. It's just a delight to play, and those who have had experience playing it are going to have an advantage because most of the kids, you know, the young guys on tour, they haven't seen it yet.
So you mentioned the equipment. You know, this past weekend, John Rahm hit a drive 418 yards. Yeah. Justin Thomas hit one 409. At your peak, what kind of distance were you hitting the ball?
Oh gosh, I was very average. I was right in the middle, which was, you know, and I think, you know, 252 yards was my average, you know, in my prime. And then as I got older, the equipment started to change, and as I aged, like a lot of people, I even got longer. So the equipment in the ball, the shaft, the club head, it's a constant debate on whether it's a good thing for the game, because you know what Tiger talked about this past week is that those who are hitting it, you know, 30, 40, 50 yards by him, McIlroy was hitting it 50 yards by Tiger. It's just a different game, and the equipment has made such a contribution to that aspect of you know, distance, that it's really separating those who you know, from a skill level to those who can only compete. You know, you have to be able to bomb it, or else you're gonna be left on the side of the road.
No doubt. So back in 1993, your best finish at a major T14 at the PGA Championships at Inverness in Toledo, Ohio. Just want to talk about your memories from that weekend. Anything particular that sticks out of what made it enjoyable, what made you play so well, really?
Well, yeah, it was kind of, you know, it was a very memorable experience. I remember getting paired with Hale Irwin in the first two rounds, and I think a lot of people know, if you know Hale, he's kind of a gruff guy, and he doesn't let you into his inner sanctum, so to speak, when you're playing. He's just, you know, he's a lone wolf type of a guy. But he was playing well, and I was playing well, and one of the greatest feelings I've ever received was kind of recognition from him that I was, you know, keeping up with him and playing well, and he recognized that, and it was just a kind of like a flow of competitors together, and the fact that he gave me that acknowledge was one of the dearest things that it's hard to explain, but it was one of the dearest things that made me feel like I belonged, and it was. I remember, unfortunately, I think I finished 14th at that tournament. If I had finished one more shot lower, it would have been given a qualifying spot back to the Masters, and I missed by one shot. And I played the Masters the year before, and I wasn't exempt for the Masters, and I wanted to keep rolling in year over year playing the Masters, and it came up one shot shy, which was unfortunate. But fond memories. Inverness is like a Southern Hills. It's one of the great classic golf courses in North America that hosts major championships, and fond memories from 1993 when Azinger beat Norman in the playoff.
So you mentioned, you know, getting that recognition from Hale Irwin. You know, as a Canadian, was there any bit of that kind of almost like imposter syndrome, where it's like, hey, what am I doing here? I mean, by that point, you'd already won on the PGA Tour, but still kind of you know, happy about that acceptance. You know, the challenge of being a Canadian back then. Did it feel like, hey, I don't know, am I supposed to be here?
Well, it had really nothing to do with being Canadian. It had everything to do with being a player. And it's kind of, yes, I had won, a couple of PGA Tour wins. In '92, I won twice, Milwaukee and the Deposit Guarantee. The Deposit Guarantee was an unofficial win. It was official money, but it wasn't an official win. But when you get kind of the legends, it's kind of like if you're a young hockey player and Gordie Howe gives you a bump or a nudge and kind of respect from the best in the game. It's kind of a personal thing. So that's what the great thing about it is, recognition from one of the greats in your eyes. And it gives you such a sense of belonging, and you want to, those connections are very important. So now young guys, how they look up to Wayne Gretzky type of thing. So when you get that acknowledgement from those who are the best at the game, it gives you it's just a lovely byproduct feeling. That's all.
So after the first round of that 93 PGA championship, speaking of a good feeling, you were tied for third. I mean, that's got to be a buzz to be like, hey, I'm in contention in a major. Do you remember what you did that night in Toledo at your hotel? Or how do you kind of stay grounded when you're in the hunt in a major?
Well, I do. I actually remember it. It's kind of like in the same thing as how I looked at Hale Irwin. That I remember having dinner with Ray Floyd, just me and him, and we're talking. I was asking him about the older, Canadians that were a generation before, guys like Stan Leonard and George Knudson and Al Johnson, and so it was, it's fun to kind of be in that environment. And then I remember I played. I don't know. I can't remember what I shot the first round, but being whisked off to the press room for interviews, and this is kind of my first kind of engagement of being in contention in a major championship. And that's a different, major championships are a step or two above PGA Tour events, and kind of each gradual ascent is a great experience. But I do remember it. I remember on the last hole on Sunday, I sunk a bunker shot on the 72nd hole, kind of that same place where Bob Tway made a bunker shot. So a lot of great feelings when you love the golf course, and you have great feelings with the engagement of the competitors. You get into contention and play well. It's one of those fond memories that like I've had a number of them at the US Open at Pebble Beach. All those things are just fond memories that stay with you and are so meaningful to you.
So you mentioned Paul Azinger beating Greg Norman in 93 at that tournament. You've obviously had the chance to compete against Greg over the years, and he's been all over the news of late recently with this LIV series. Just, I
Mhm.
mean, he seems to be, people kind of dumping on him. Just want to talk about your experiences with Greg. How was he to compete against? Any stories to share about him over the years?
Sure. Yeah, I've got a particular interesting one with when Canada was playing Australia in the Dunhill Cup at the Old Course at St. Andrews. Um, I remember, let's see, I think Barr won his match, and Dan Halderson lost his match, and I'm playing. And we're Canada against Australia, and I'm playing Greg Norman in the deciding match, as it turns out. And I'm 2 shots down on him. Was it 3 shots down? No, 2 shots down on him, and we're playing the road hole, the 17th hole. And he hits it onto the road, and I make must have been a 65-foot putt for birdie, and he double bogeys the hole. So we're tied, and we go into a sudden death playoff, and this is determined whether Canada advances or Australia advances in the Dunhill Cup. And I remember on the first hole we tied, and the second hole I had a 15-foot putt for birdie, and Greg got into trouble, and he had a 25-foot putt for par. And I'm going, okay, and my mindset was wrong. I should have just kept on focusing on trying to make this putt and expecting him to win it, or to make this putt. So he makes the 25-foot birdie putt, and I feel a little deflated that which was a poor mindset for me. And I missed my putt, and then he beat me on the 5th hole sudden death, in Australia advance. But yeah, Greg has some history. He tried to, back in the early 90s, partner with Rupert Murdoch to take the tour in a different direction. Tim Fincham, then the commissioner of the PGA Tour, overrid him. And I think Greg felt a little bitterness, and always had this resentment, and had a vendetta. And now the situation has just absolutely blown up with this new direction, funding by the Saudis, in one particular investor who put in $1.78 billion initially, and I've heard rumors that he's put in another $2 billion on this. So they're well funded. There's no question about that. They've got the attention of the PGA Tour. They're trying to do what appears to be a hostile takeover of the assets of the PGA Tour, the players. It involved Phil Mickelson. It appears that a few months back, Phil Mickelson strapped on a suicide vest and detonated, himself, and causing a lot of problems. And recently, I think a lot of people watched Greg Norman in an interview last week, being hit with these hard questions. A reporter asked him about what about, the Saudis' involvement in the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, and Greg's reply to that was not too good. I'm sure he wants a mulligan over that one, and it's really not sitting very well from a credibility perception. So perspective. So the twos and fro's that's going on with this live golf series, it's opposite. The first one's opposite the Rbc Canadian Open in London in about 3 weeks from now. So it's going to be interesting on who's going. There are, a bunch of people that are going over, and they're going to find out to see whether it's going to compete with the PGA Tour. But there's a lot of people like Tiger and who are on one side, and it's very interesting, Chris, because if you don't take it's very polarizing. So if you take a position this way or that way, it's really defining on what's going to happen in the future, particularly with the PGA Tour.
You mentioned back in the day, Greg getting involved with Rupert Murdoch. Were you ever approached to compete in any alternate tours or any money thrown at you to sway you away from the PGA Tour?
Oh God, no. This is a different animal. Like, first of all, in the 80s and the 90s, there's never been this merger, acquisition, or takeover attempt by anyone. This is the first time. The Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer separated from the PGA Tour. From the PGA of America to form the PGA Tour, because the division of touring players was very different than the division of club pros, and that made a lot of sense. And but this is like a hostile takeover. And there's another group called the Premier Golf League in London that's trying to get the PGA Tour's attention. They want a joint venture, and the PGA Tour hasn't even listened to them. They don't think it's a feasible, a viable way to do it. So there's a threat to the PGA Tour, both with the Live Golf group. There's a threat to the PGA Tour with the Premier group, and I think they're the frontline battles that the PGA Tour are doing a good job. And we're going to just have to see how, when the thing is, when you're funded with that much money becomes the driving factor, and it makes a lot of people make decisions they wouldn't otherwise. And that's a dynamic that's threatening the PGA Tour, and it's very interesting to hear what Tiger has to say. It's very interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see what Phil's going to do. The fact that he chose not to defend his championship at PGA was very interesting and probably very telling. And now with this book that Alan Shipnick came out with, talking about this alleged $40 million debt that Phil has with Las Vegas. It's making for some, interesting drama, and we get to see how it's going to unfold in the near future.
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually just in my car listening to Alan Shipnuck on Dan Patrick talking about the whole Phil thing. And, according to him, this is basically based on the gambling debts. It's Phil really needs that money. No matter how much he's made, he's still in some kind of financial situation where it is strictly about the money because he needs it.
Exactly. So because what has happened that, I know that I've heard from reliable sources that Phil has cashed checks, which means in order to cash checks, he's had to sign on the line to jump, which means he's not dealing in good faith with his obligations on the PGA Tour. He's not allowed to, he's not, and it hasn't been disclosed yet. So the fact that and he's recruited other PGA Tour members to jump as well. So there's been a number, allegedly, there's been a number of players who have signed. And Greg Norman in his interview last week said those people had received checks. They had money in their pocket. And then when this thing blew up with Phil, a lot of players who had signed, they gave their money back. And they left. They went hightailing it back to the PGA Tour. But I think Phil may have spent some of that money. And this is all speculation on my part. But if he's received the money and spent it, like reducing his debt, he's stuck. He's really in trouble. And if that's the only path, like, I think I'd love to see Phil come with a full mea culpa, that the apology that he did was empty, in my opinion, in a lot of people's opinion. He's getting beat up like crazy because he looks like he's heading down this path, and not doing, because America and the world loves people who have adversity, have an intervention, and then have a new narrative of recovery. He would be loved and adored more than he ever has if he came clean. But I'm not sure that's even an option with the path he's on. And it's sad, it's unfortunate, and we're gonna see how it's gonna unfold.
Yeah, I mean, we saw that with Tiger. You know what I mean? How many times has he messed up, and they're still giving him standing ovations, on the 18th at Augusta this year, because he's kind of been a little bit more transparent. So, well, one of the big stories. Sorry, go ahead.
So people relate to whether you're addicted to booze, drugs, food, sex, whatever. They can relate to it, and then when you recover from it, like gambling in this case, these superstars become humanized, and people can relate to them. It makes for a better story, and I think a lot of people are hoping that Phil can get back on that track.
Yeah, hope so. So I want to jump over to Canadian golf. I mean, Canadian golf's come light years from the 80s and 90s, when it seemed like you and Dave Barr were the only guys out there. I mean, any sense of personal pride when you see the level of success amongst the Canadian men and women right now, and you're kind of helped lay that groundwork?
Yes, well, today is a lot different. There's a lot more guys more Canadians on tour. We got Brooke Henderson doing so well on the ladies tour, and Golf Canada is making such a significant impact. They have a vision that Kevin Blue, the new chief sport officer, a very ambitious project to put 20 players on the PGA Tour and LPGA Tour in the next 12 years, I believe it is. A very ambitious project, but I love that. And with what Corey Connors and Mackenzie Hughes and Nick Taylor and Adam Hadwin, there are more Canadians out there, and there are more Canadians playing well at a higher level than there ever was, and that's great. And I think if we can all pull together and develop, particularly from a mindset, everyone's got the physical ability that can get to the professional level. You can get to the professional level, the PGA Tour Canada or the Corn Ferry Tour. Your game is good enough. But what really separates those who make it and those who don't are the thoughts that run through your mind on a daily basis. The belief system, and building a mindset that is ironclad when it comes to expectations and self-imposed pressure and situations. Like Mike Weir is a perfect example of that. Like Mike physically, he's in great shape, but he's small in stature, but he's an absolute giant mentally. And he built a belief system to break through a barrier of winning, being the first male major champion, winning the Masters. And I think there's a lot of room. I think Corey Connors and the future Canadians can blow past Mike's barrier as well and win multiple majors and many, many tournaments on the PGA Tour.
So you mentioned, mindset, and I wanted to lead into Mindtrack Golf. You're the CEO of Mindtrack Golf, which helps players improve their mental and physical approach to the game. Just explain what exactly is Mindtrack Golf, and how can it help, the rest of us out there?
Well, we're a startup company, and it's a thought protocol that when you do it, what it does is it brings you into the present moment. It stops you from conditioning your thoughts to the result, because when all golfers, whether you're Rory McIlroy or 18 handicap, if your attention is to focused on the result or the score, you get ahead of yourself. It stimulates a lot of expectations, and you go down a bad rabbit hole. And most golfers haven't been conditioned. You got to condition your mind to a mental fitness level the same way you've got to condition your swing for a physical fitness skill level to play golf. No one has ever spent time on this. And it's a discovery that I made years ago, and we've created it into a software. Sean Foley is on our board of directors. We're in the process of bringing on board the third level of expertise. So we got Sean Foley on the coaching expertise, my side as the playing expertise, and we're bringing on this clinical psychologist. I won't give you his name because we don't have a contract with him yet. But if you were to go on Hal Sutton's Be the Right Club Today podcast, you're going to hear this guy's name and listen to him talk. And it's just a remarkable discovery on how he explains the psychology, because it validates the process and the protocols of Mindtrack golf. And so we're very excited about this. We want to get it into the market as soon as we can. And, we still have a ways to go before we can commercially launch the product.
So you can go to mindtrackgolf.com, and it's track, TRK, no C in it. That's right.
TRAK.
TRAK, excuse me. Yeah,
That's right. Mindtrackgolf.com. That's right. And you can go to the App Store and download Mindtrack for free. And you can do so before it becomes a commercial product. So we're still beta testing it. We've got an engagement with the PGA of America to bring in this as the mental fitness protocol for golf. And for the last 100 years, everyone who plays the game of golf knows that golf is a psychosomatic game, but yet no one has a product. Everyone's fighting for a very crowded space on golf equipment and game improvement equipment in the form of putters and clubs and drivers, but no one has gone after the mental space. We're the only one in that space we're going after, and we're anticipating entering uncontested market space on it. So we've got a remarkable team, and we look forward to getting this thing launched as soon as possible.
Awesome. So yeah, mindtrackgolf.com. So Dick, last question, we're running out of time here, but the RBC Canadian Open coming in a few weeks here in Toronto at St. George's. You played in close to 30 RBC Canadian Opens. Any experiences playing at St. George? Your thoughts on the course and how it's going to shape out in a few weeks?
Well, it's just such a great golf course. St. George's is one of my top 3 courses in all of Canada, and it fluctuates. It used to be number 1, now it's number 2, and it's such a fantastic golf course. When the PGA Tour players get back to it, they just so refreshing to play such a fantastic course. It's gonna be great. It's not a long course, but it's a strategic course, and the players are gonna love it. So we're glad that we're back into the game after a couple of years hiatus due to COVID. RBC has just been such a fantastic sponsor on the PGA Tour, and in particular the Canadian Open and RBC Heritage and their ambassador team. They're doing such a good job for golf in Canada. So looking forward to seeing what it's going to produce as well.
Yeah, I had the chance to play St. George's for the first time myself last week for RBC Canadian Open Media Day, and can't wait for it. My experience 2019 in Hamilton was one of the best sporting events ever been a part of, and can't wait for this year's Canadian Open. So Dick, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Richard Zokol, you can go check him out, mindtrackgolf.com. Can't thank you enough for joining me today.
Always, it's a pleasure, Chris, and don't hesitate to reach out anytime.